Spanish or English based on the flag. No, there's no flag. It just put English or Spanish and you'll hear the press conference in your language. Hay un botón abajo al lado derecho de su pantalla donde puedes escoger tu idioma preferido y se escuchará toda la rueda de prensa en ese idioma. Si eres bilingüe, no necesitas usar esta herramienta.
Can someone remind me, are we doing a Facebook Live on this that we should be promoting?
We're not doing a Facebook Live because this is a webinar.
Okay.
This isn't a webinar, it's just a regular Zoom meeting, and so it won't be on Facebook Live, Amber.
Great.
We'd love to ask for reporters on the call or anyone from news outlets to please rename yourself with your new name with your news outlet. And if you don't know how to do that, by right-clicking on your picture, to just go ahead and chat it. That way we can keep track, because there are a lot of community members and interpreters on the line. So before we start, just one more instruction for folks who are a part of our organizations. If you're not a speaker or a press person, it would be great to just turn off your camera so that we can focus on the folks who are speaking on this call today. We'd really appreciate that, and we'll start in about 1 minute. And for those reporters or news outlets that just joined, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could modify your names, rename yourself with the name of your news outlet. And if you don't know how to do that, although I'm sure by now you all know how with all this Zoom technology that we've been using recently, if you could just chat your information, that way we can capture it. We've also just received a request that if you could also chat your email or add your email to the chat, then we can, Voices for Children will send you a press kit with with the fact sheet, which serves as an executive summary, along with the statements by the individuals who are sharing with us today. And we are going to get started. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Marcela Diaz, and I work for Somos Un Pueblo Unido, a statewide immigrant-based worker and civil rights organization. We are joined here today by community organizations and immigrant advocates to highlight a report by New Mexico Voices for Children on the impact of COVID-19 on immigrant communities, particularly impact of immigrant exclusion in federal relief packets on families and the local economy. Some speakers at this press conference will be speaking in English, others in Spanish. There is an interpretation feature at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. It's a little globe. If you press on that, and you can choose your language of preference, Spanish or English, and you will hear the speakers in that language during the whole course of the press conference. If you are bilingual, you will not need to use this feature. Los participantes en esta rueda de prensa estarán presentando su información en inglés y algunos otros en español. Hay un botón abajo al lado derecho de su pantalla, de sus pantallas, donde puedes escoger tu idioma preferido y se escuchará toda la rueda de prensa en ese idioma. Si eres bilingüe, no necesitas usar esta herramienta. Everyone but the speakers will be muted. After the speakers finish, reporters can raise their hand next to their name in the participant list. This is a feature at the bottom of the participant list, and we will unmute you to ask your questions in the order you've raised your hand. Also, we will insert a link in the chat box. I hope Voices can do this for us, to the report. And if you add your emails in the chat box, Voices for Children will be sure to send you a press packet with all the information contained in our press conference today. Somos Un Pueblo Unido, CAFE, from Southern New Mexico, El Centro de Igualdad y Derechos, and Partnership for Community Action in Albuquerque, and Voices for Children have been working together since the beginning of this pandemic to narrow the information gap between government and local immigrant communities, particularly Spanish-speaking communities. We've been doing this with virtual forums, workshops, town halls, roundtables, making sure that families get accurate and timely COVID-19 information from local and state officials. But this flow of information goes both ways. The purpose of this report and the stories it contains is to really help our policymakers, elected officials, and the public at large understand how essential immigrant families are and workers to ensuring the public health and economic security and recovery for all New Mexicans. With that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker from Voices for Children, Amber Whalen, who is the Deputy Director of that organization, to outline the findings of this report, and then we will hear from community members from Las Cruces, from Deming, from Hobbs, Roswell, and from Santa Fe and Albuquerque. And we will also be hearing from Joanna Bencomo, a city council member from Las Cruces, and a member of the finance committee on her council, to talk a little bit about some of the impacts that they have on a city like Las Cruces that has a pretty high percentage of immigrants. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Amber Whalen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amber Whalen. I'm the Deputy Director at New Mexico Voices for Children. And really to start off with, I wanted to share some of the motivation behind this report for us and our partners. And that's that really, as human beings, we all share an overarching goal. We all want what's best for our families and our kids and our communities. And this pandemic has really shown us in the most basic way how connected we are, and that we all depend on one another, and we all have an important role to play in the well-being of our communities. And we know that immigrants are an important part of the cultural and economic fabric of those communities in our state, and they're a key part of the workforce that is keeping New Mexico running during these crises. And so you can see there that immigrants are really valued and significant members of our communities. Nearly 200,000 New Mexico residents, 1 in 10, are immigrants. That's even higher in some areas of the state. 19% of residents in Luna County are immigrants, 18% in Doña Ana, 13% in Santa Fe County. And we also know that some residents of our state, some immigrants, don't have full documentation, and that 38,000, about 8% of New Mexico kids, have a parent who does not have documentation. But regardless of their status, our immigrants in our state work, they pay taxes, they create jobs, they spend money in our economy. And despite these major contributions, what we also know is that many immigrant communities in our state have been left out of relief measures at the federal, especially at the federal level, but also at the state level. You can see on the next slide. Now what we're going to jump into is a little bit of the content from the report itself. And so what we start off talking about is some of the major contributions that immigrants in New Mexico make to our economy to make it stronger. Immigrants in New Mexico pay taxes. They pay nearly $1 billion in federal, state, and local taxes every year. And undocumented immigrants in New Mexico, just undocumented immigrants alone, pay nearly $68 million just in state and local taxes in New Mexico. They work in essential industries. They're more likely to be in those frontline industries that are really keeping our state and our nation running right now. They're 2.5 times more likely than US-born citizens to be in agricultural and mineral extraction industries. So those farming, ranching, oil and gas industries that make up more than 12% of our state's GDP, they're much more likely to be employed there. And all of these workers contribute to their local economies, not just by paying taxes, by spending money as well. We also know they run a lot of businesses in our state, that immigrants are more likely than non-immigrants to start businesses, and that 15,000 immigrant entrepreneurs in New Mexico employ over 27,000 residents in our state, and that those businesses generate over $4 billion a year in sales. But you can see on the next slide that we also know immigrants are being left out of a lot of different types of COVID relief, and that's primarily because they're already ineligible for many of our country's safety net programs. So they sometimes face greater challenges during economic downturns and during pandemics and national emergencies. And something else that's worth noting is because many immigrants live in mixed status families where there may be US citizens, there may be immigrants, there may be immigrants that are undocumented. These limitations on safety net relief also impact many US citizens, and especially US citizen children whose parents maybe don't qualify for relief. Now, just to quickly touch on some of the aspects that we jump into in the report of federal relief, you can see on the next slide, we go into the stimulus checks that were provided as part of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act. So that included a provision for US residents to receive relief checks. And while this is necessary relief, we know on one hand it's inadequate, both in amount, and then the fact that many immigrant workers are not going to receive that relief even though they work and pay income taxes and state taxes every year. So that's because it's only available for people with a social security number, and also the law requires that every adult member of a household who's on a family's tax return has a social security number in order for anyone in that family to get their rebate. So what this does is this excludes not only immigrant residents of New Mexico who don't have Social Security numbers, but it also excludes U.S. citizen children who have parents without a social, and U.S. citizen spouses of people without a social. So one of the things that we highlight in this report is that we estimate that at least 30,000 New Mexico adults and at least 38,000 New Mexico kids with a parent who's not fully documented will be left out of that relief. And that's going to total over $55 million that our New Mexico families, that our workers, that our state is missing out on in federal relief. Now on the next slide, we go into unemployment insurance a bit, and we know that New Mexico has been hard hit by unemployment. In our state, as a response to this pandemic, our unemployment insurance or UI claims are up by over 3,000%. About 12% of our workforce has filed for UI. Now, the state of New Mexico has taken a number of extra steps to support unemployed workers during this time, but unfortunately, because of federal provisions, many immigrants are going to be left out of this relief because they lack Social Security numbers or work authorization. And so we know that there's at least 16,000 immigrant workers in New Mexico who don't have Social Security numbers, and instead they're paying their taxes using an IRS issued what's called an ITIN, an individual taxpayer identification number. Now, given what we know are average unemployment rates and projected ones for New Mexico, that means that more than 2,000 New Mexico workers, immigrant workers, are missing out on that federal relief. And that's to the tune of about $950 per worker per week. It's over $2 million per week in unemployment insurance benefits that is not going to unemployed workers in our state. So we know that's a major hit for our families. Now to the next slide, there's a number of safety net provisions that are included in federal relief, and both the state and the federal government have taken a number of steps to improve access to these relief programs or to include additional funding to these programs. And while that hasn't been enough, there's been some good steps taken, but the issue here is that when it comes to programs, healthcare programs, housing relief, food security programs like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program or SNAP, the issue that we highlight in this report and that we detail is that many immigrant families are not being included in that relief because they lack access to those programs. And those are federal provisions that have been in place before. But what that essentially means is while this relief is being passed, that so many of our kids and our families and workers are not able to access those really crucial resources. So overall, and in summary, what we'd say is that immigrant families, we know they provide really crucial economic and social contributions to our state. They work, they own businesses, they pay taxes. And if our state's going to recover from this pandemic and from the resulting recession that's likely to happen, we need to ensure that all New Mexicans are included in relief and can continue to help rebuild our economy. And so in the report, we include recommendations at both the state and the federal level in order to recommend to governments different ways that they can ensure all New Mexico workers, families, and communities can survive through and thrive after this crisis. So on the next slide, you can see some themes that you'll find in our recommendations, which we have in detail in our report. But our state recommendations have to do with creating and expanding cash assistance programs so that they're available for those who don't qualify for other programs and that they're available regardless of immigration status. Now, we also recommend creating basic and affordable health plans that are available to all New Mexico residents, again, regardless of immigration status. We also recommend expanding and increasing food security resources so that all New Mexicans and all New Mexico children have the nutrition that they need to make it through. And we also have tax policy recommendations in there. And so we recommend a couple of different tax policies, including expanding New Mexico's working families tax credit to include immigrants and all immigrant workers that are working and contributing and paying taxes in New Mexico. Now on the federal side, one of our main recommendations is to expand eligibility for those relief checks, for those rebates that Americans are getting all over the country, and to expand that eligibility to include all people on a tax return, everybody in our state and in our nation, regardless of immigration status. Also to ensure that eligibility for unemployment insurance relief is inclusive of all workers. We also have some recommendations on improving safety net benefits and a really strong recommendation that we have in there as well is for the federal government to increase state and local COVID relief. And this is a really key part, that they maximize flexibility so that our local governments, our cities and our counties and our state government can spend that money in the way that they know is best to help all of New Mexico. And that's it. Thanks, Marcella.
Thank you, Amber. We really appreciate it. Again, for press that joined late, many of these presentations will be in Spanish today, but luckily we have two amazing interpreters, Peter Cattell and Maria Cristina Lopez, who will be doing the interpretation. If you want to hear this in Spanish or in English, your language of preference, you can go to the little globe button on the bottom right-hand side of your screen and decide which language you want to hear it in. If you're bilingual, obviously you don't need to use this option. De nuevo, para las personas que acaban de entrar a esta rueda de prensa, si necesitan interpretación, hay un botón al lado derecho abajo donde pueden escoger su idioma de preferencia y puede escuchar toda la rueda de prensa en ese idioma. We also want to remind reporters on the call that if you put in your email address, Sharon from New Mexico Voices for Children will send you the full press packet with the stories, with the fact sheet in relation to the report, as well as a link to the report and many of the presentations that you're going to hear today. We are going to start with Gladys Saucedo. She is a member of Somos Un Pueblo Unido and lives in Lee County, Hobbs to be exact. Gladys, si quieres dar tu presentación, por favor. Y muy bien, perfecto.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Gladys Saucedo. Tengo 16 años viviendo aquí en Hobbs. Tengo 3 hijos. Soy miembro de Somos Lee County, grupo afiliado a Somos Un Pueblo Unido. Mi esposo tiene aproximadamente 15 años trabajando en la industria del petróleo, pero con la baja de los precios tiene desde el mes de marzo ya sin trabajo, o sea, ya lo despidieron por completo. Nuestra preocupación es cómo vamos a solventar nuestros gastos este mes de mayo. Si por nuestro estatus migratorio nosotros no calificamos para el desempleo ni para el cheque federal, la ayuda. Y tenemos hijos ciudadanos. Y pues lo más frustrante para nosotros es que nuestro hijo empieza su colegio este otoño y no sabemos cómo vamos a pagar esos gastos. Es muy difícil para familias como la nuestra. Pues gracias a Dios tenemos amigos que nos han ayudado, pero pues no es suficiente. Necesitamos ayuda del gobierno federal y estatal, porque también nosotros pagamos impuestos. Y aportamos bastante a este país, a nuestro estado y a nuestra comunidad. Trabajamos duro para todo eso.
Gracias, Gladys. I just want to let folks know that all of our speakers will be on at the end. We have 5, and you can ask questions directly of the people who presented today. The next person that we're going to hear from is Nicte Magallanes, a leader and member of CAFE, Comunidades de Fe en Acción, in southern New Mexico. She is from Deming. Nicte?
Is it working?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
We can't see your face. So
Okay.
if you could put your camera on, that would be great. Perfect.
Okay, it's my first Zoom call, I'm sorry. Yes, my name is Nicte. I live here in Deming, New Mexico, in then Luna County. I'm a single mother of 2 daughters, and I'm also part of the undocumented community. Been here since I was around about 2 years old. And I'm a leader with Café Comunidades en Acción y Fe. And yeah, being excluded from the stimulus package is very frustrating because we are part of the economy and we do contribute to the economy, and everybody is getting their relief, their $1,200. Plus I do have 2 citizen children, but I didn't qualify for it. So it's been very frustrating, very hard. Thankfully I have my family, because if not, then I don't know what I would do. I used to be a waitress, worked in the restaurant industry, and since well, that's not right now because of the COVID, it's not all the restaurants shut down. I don't qualify for unemployment, and even before COVID, I know that this county had a high percentage of unemployment, so I can't imagine how difficult it would be for people right now. And well, yeah, I hope for the future that the government would take people like me into consideration, that because we live here as well, we are part of the economy, we also need some kind of aid, and hopefully that they will make some changes in regards to that. I know in California they have helped some undocumented people. They have a fund for them, so hopefully New Mexico can do something with that.
Thank you, Nicte. We appreciate your contribution today. The next person that we are going to hear from is Olga Santana. She's a member from El Centro de Igualdad y Derechos, and she is in Albuquerque. Olga, can you please unmute yourself?
Sí, ok. Hola, mi nombre es Olga Santana. Yo soy una trabajadora doméstica, esposa y madre de 4 niñas y miembro del Centro de Igualdad y Derechos. Este pasado mes de marzo, yo perdí mi trabajo debido a la pandemia del COVID-19. Durante los últimos 4 años, yo he trabajado como trabajadora doméstica, cuidando de una persona mayor. Me da mucho orgullo proveer mis servicios, ya que no solamente estoy cuidando de las personas más vulnerables en nuestra comunidad, pero también estoy ayudando a sus familias que tal vez no pueden cuidar de sus seres queridos. Nosotros, los trabajadores inmigrantes, siempre hemos sido esenciales y hemos trabajado duro para no solamente sacar a nuestras familias adelante, sino también a nuestra comunidad. Cuando fui despedida, sabía que iba a ocurrir una inestabilidad financiera para mi familia. Cada semana mi esposo y yo nos preguntamos cómo vamos a pagar la renta y los gastos básicos de nuestra familia. No es justo que paguemos nuestros impuestos, que trabajadores inmigrantes de bajos salarios estén en la primera línea como trabajadores esenciales, como mi esposo, y tengamos hijos ciudadanos y no tengamos acceso al alivio federal. La comunidad inmigrante de bajos recursos somos los más vulnerables y los más afectados. Debemos ser tomados en cuenta. Somos seres humanos y somos parte de esta comunidad. Al excluir a miles de paquetes federales, no solamente impacta a nuestras familias directamente, pero también a la economía local donde vivimos y trabajamos. Tenemos que trabajar juntos para asegurar de que todas nuestras familias, sin importar su estatus migratorio, sean incluidas en paquetes federales, estatales y locales de alivio. Es la única manera en que vamos a poder prosperar y poder reconstruir nuestra economía. Gracias.
Gracias, Olga. Again, for folks who might have joined late, you can hear full interpretations of this by pressing your interpretation button on the bottom right-hand side of your screen and choosing your language of preference. Next, we're going to go to Verónica Velázquez, a member of Somos Un Pueblo Unido, and she is in Santa Fe. Verónica.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Verónica Velázquez, soy miembro del Centro de Trabajadores de Somos un Pueblo Unido ya por 9 años. He vivido en Santa Fe en los últimos 15 años con mi esposo y mi único hijo de 12 años. Por más de 10 años, mi esposo y yo trabajamos en un restaurante donde nunca se nos pagó el sueldo mínimo de la ciudad. Aunque ahora mi esposo estaba trabajando en un trabajo de mantenimiento como conserje. Es una escuela privada. Hasta el verano pasado trabajó cuando fue puesto en discapacidad a largo plazo debido a una cirugía que tuvo en la espalda para tratar su ciática. Mi esposo tuvo que someterse a una segunda operación ahora en febrero de su cadera de reemplazo. En esta ocasión, pues mi esposo no ha sido de alta para trabajar, pero la verdad no estamos seguros si su empleador lo va a recontratar por lo que está pasando. Recibimos un último cheque por incapacidad de mi esposo por 2,700 en febrero. Pues eso fue suficiente para pagar nuestros gastos por los últimos 2 meses. Pues ya se nos terminó. Realmente nosotros hemos estado hasta pidiendo prestado a nuestros amigos porque no ha sido suficiente, más con esto que se atravesó, porque nosotros vivíamos como quien dice al día, no teníamos como un ahorro para sobrevivir de ahí, entonces eso es lo que nos ha estado tocando hacer, y más ahorita con esta situación es muy difícil. Actualmente yo estoy trabajando en un restaurante de comida rápida, pero mis horas han sido reducidas considerablemente en menos de una semana. Antes tenía 32 horas, ahora solo un día y a veces 6 horas es lo que trabajo. Entonces, perdón, pues sí me preocupo. Disculpen, me he desesperado a veces porque digo, no sé dónde vamos a sacar, pero más que eso se me hace injusto por las leyes como están, por cómo somos sacados de programas que podemos calificar a nuestros hijos para que nos puedan ayudar. Desafortunadamente, pues no calificamos ni por desempleo, ni pues por nada. Y menos recibiremos un estímulo de cheque federal, a pesar de que nuestro hijo es ciudadano, ya que declaramos impuestos, aunque tengamos un número ITIN, pero ni así. Entonces lo que yo hice fue pedir estampillas, aunque por rumores atrasados decían que no era bueno pedir porque si arreglabas en un futuro te iba a afectar, pero ¿quién va a estar pensando en un futuro si ahorita lo que necesita uno es comer y sacar a nuestro hijo adelante? No quería llorar, la verdad, dije no voy a llorar, pero es muy triste todo lo que nos está pasando y no soy la única, somos muchos. Y la verdad, yo decía, pues, tal vez nuestros hijos califiquen, pero fue muy difícil creer que no recibiríamos el cheque federal ni siquiera para nuestros hijos que son ciudadanos. Y yo digo que es injusto y triste que siempre tengamos que ser rechazados o ser a un lado sin recibir ningún beneficio. Y aunque yo cada sábado voy y me formo a donde dan comida, pues sí puedo comida en algunos lugares, pero siempre estamos pensando en cómo vamos a sacar este mes, el que sigue. Y aunque en muchos lugares digan, te pueden esperar, de nada sirve, porque lo que va a pasar es que tus deudas se van a incrementar y entonces vas a estar endeudado. Entonces de nada sirve. Entonces yo creo que es justo que hagan algo para que recibamos alguna ayuda por todo lo que estamos pasando. Gracias y mil disculpas.
Gracias, Vero. Agradecemos mucho tu participación. We're going to go next to Maria de Jesus Jaques, who is also a Somos member and lives in Roswell, New Mexico. Can we just be sure that Maria is unmuted, please? Perfecto, María. Procede.
Buenas tardes. ¿Sí me escuchan?
Sí,
Ok.
sí te escuchamos.
Me llamo María de Jesús Jaques. He vivido aquí en Roswell por 1 año. Soy miembro de la organización Somos un Pueblo Unido. Tengo 2 niños y uno más que está por llegar. Yo llegué a vivir aquí a Nuevo México hace 1 año, después de que yo vivía en Arkansas y ya yo perdí mi trailer debido a las inundaciones que pasaron el año pasado allá. Como ya no calificamos tampoco para ninguna ayuda por desastre natural, pues tuvimos que emigrar aquí con unos conocidos que teníamos. Ahorita mi esposo trabaja en una lechería como leñador. Antes de todo esto, pues él trabajaba sus horas normal, que eran 70 horas por semana, ganando 11 por hora. Ahora le redujeron sus horas y sus días, ahora solamente está trabajando 24 horas por semana. Tenemos muchos gastos, ya que no recibo ninguna ayuda, ni estampillas ni nada, mis hijos no son de aquí. Incluyendo ahorita pues mi seguro, estoy pagando un seguro para poder atender mi embarazo. Yo ahorita estoy vendiendo pan y empanadas con otra amiga para poder traer otro poco de dinero extra en la casa, porque pues va a ser muy difícil el futuro pedir prestado. Por lo mismo, ya que no calificamos para ningún tipo de ayuda ni los cheques de estímulo. En la mayoría de los hogares se requiere de una solvencia económica para cubrir los gastos diarios. Cada familia se administra según sus ingresos. Estamos enterados que muchas familias vendieron sus cosas personales, sus bienes, sus herramientas de trabajo para poder seguir solventando los gastos diarios, los alimentos y los biles. Solo queremos no perder la estabilidad para seguir sosteniendo una calidad de hogar. Sabemos y entendemos todos los mensajes que nos deja como nación en los medios de comunicación, como en la televisión, la radio, las redes sociales, pero debemos de estar todo el pueblo unido y convencido de que no podemos enfrentar esto solos. Por consecuencia, necesitamos apoyo de nuestro gobierno y empresas grandes en crecimiento. Exigimos que nuestros líderes busquen estrategias para ayudar a todas nuestras familias que no podemos aplicar para el apoyo que brindó el gobierno, porque estoy segura de lo importante que somos para el desarrollo federal y económico del Estado de Nuevo México. Hacemos conciencia y sabemos que la gran parte de nuestros ingresos se distribuyen en impuestos y pagos de servicios personales, alimentos, etc. Gracias.
Gracias, María de Jesús. We'd like to remind reporters that in your press packets, you should have many of the comments that were made today, both in English and Spanish. We've translated many of them into English. And the folks that are on this call today were all featured in the report itself. So more information about them is in that report. We're going to jump over now to Joanna Bencomo, who is a city councilor in Las Cruces and a member of their finance committee. Joanna, and this will be the last speaker, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Marcela, and thank you to everyone who's just spoken. I feel incredibly honored to be part of this panel with really powerful women. Good afternoon. My name is Joanna Bencomo. I'm proud to be here today in my role as Las Cruces City Councilor. I'm also proud to say that Las Cruces for a long time has been a welcoming city by official resolution in 2017, but more importantly, by practice for much longer than that. Last year, the city welcomed over 17,000 asylum seekers, and the city provided care and refuge when the federal government failed to do so. This year, yet again, the city finds itself working hard to fill the huge gaps that the federal government has left behind during this public health crisis. In a moment where small cities like ours are having to plan, ponder, and worry about the future of our budgets and economic stability, not only for city government, but for our 100,000 residents, budgets that depend on gross receipts taxes like ours will significantly suffer. Restoring our economy will literally depend on all people's ability to participate in the economy. Federal COVID-19 relief packages that explicitly leave out immigrant, mixed status families, my community, is not only irresponsible and offensive, but this decision also has ripple effects for the second largest city in the state. When these Las Cruces families don't have cash in their pockets, they can't participate in an economy. And as you've heard from the report, their contributions are significant and should be valued in the state and in the city. To ensure public health and economic recovery, we will all have to be part of the solution moving forward. I will continue to make sure that all COVID-19 relief efforts at the city level continue to include all of our families, but I fear that it won't be enough. We must continue to call on our state and federal governments to provide equitable assistance for all families, regardless of status, and to all cities, regardless of our size. Thank you again for having me. I'm so proud to be here.
Thank you, Councillor Bencomo. We are going to open it up to folks who have questions. The best way to do this is to either raise your hand or to chat that you have a question, and you will be unmuted by Marianne, who is helping facilitate this portion of the event. Are there any questions for our panelists? So Jessica Dyer has a question. Can we make sure she's unmuted? And can you let us know what your...
I'm with the Albuquerque Journal. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Jessica. Go ahead.
So my question to the organizations, New Mexico Voices for Children in particular, is have you approached the governor or her administration with your recommendations, and what was the feedback?
That's a great question, Jessica. We have been in close contact with the administration, and we have been, as we've been developing these policy recommendations, we're going to be sharing them with the administration. This report was just released today, so we haven't shared this full list with them, but they have been very receptive to recommendations that we have had. For example, we knew that a lot of information was being missed by immigrant families because a lot of information was being distributed initially in English, and we saw that the administration, that the governor and her teams, various cabinet agencies went ahead and made information available in Spanish. So we've seen the governor's team and many state legislators, we've seen that they've been very responsive to try to ensure that all New Mexico families are left out of relief. I think this is an incredible time, and people are trying to respond as quickly as they can, and that's why we think it's important that there's voices heard that are really representative of all New Mexicans in providing these recommendations. So we're hoping that the administration will be receptive to the state recommendations that we have in the report.
Thank you, Amber. And I just also want to add that we'll be sending these reports to all policymakers and legislators who can potentially include immigrants in additional recovery efforts in the state. We have Mayra from Univision.
Buenas tardes, ¿me pueden escuchar?
Sí.
Gracias, sí. Sé que existen estas recomendaciones, pero quería saber, nosotros también recibimos muchas llamadas de los televidentes de cuándo o cómo, si es que habría, ¿no?, un alivio. Hemos hablado también, por ejemplo, hemos hecho la misma pregunta a la gobernadora, también a Javier Martínez sobre esta legislación de emergencia que van a tener en junio, pero ¿hay algún mensaje que se le pueda dar a las familias que están desesperadas en estos tiempos? Por ejemplo, si es que va a haber y si habrá, no, conforme a estas recomendaciones, alguna ayuda.
Can I'm gonna ask maybe Joanna to respond, if that's okay. No? Amber? You can respond in English and it'll be interpreted into Spanish if you choose.
I think that's a great question. And one thing that I would just say is that's what we're hoping with this report and this release and all of these incredible organizations doing work across the state. We're trying to ensure that immigrant voices are not lost in these responses, that even as policymakers are overwhelmed with completely unprecedented situations that they're trying to respond to and doing to the best of their ability. Unfortunately, we know that immigrant communities are often overlooked. Their contributions, their essentialness to our economy is often not recognized. And so we're trying to really raise that awareness here with this report. We're trying to ensure that they are not forgotten in these conversations, that their contributions are recognized, and that they are included in all relief immediately, because we know that so many New Mexico families are facing huge challenges now. And if we don't address what's happening with those families and within our communities, then our community and our state, we're not going to be able to survive through this crisis, and we're not going to be able to thrive after it.
Sí quiero agregar algo, Marcela. Voy a responder en español porque preguntó la pregunta en español. Puedo hablar específicamente del alivio en las cruces para familias que están aquí en la ciudad, inmigrantes, estatus mixto, todo lo que hemos, el paquete que hemos sacado aquí en las cruces es incluso a todos. Ninguna de la ayuda que hemos dado aquí en las cruces para los residentes va a tener restricciones. Entonces yo les urjo a las familias en las cruces que mientras esperamos a que actúe el Estado o tal vez también el gobierno federal, que las familias aquí en las cruces se sientan seguras de pedir ayuda a la ciudad, porque sí la hay. No puedo hablar por mis colegas en otras partes del estado, pero tan siquiera aquí en las cruces sí les urjo a familias inmigrantes que busquen ayuda de la ciudad, porque sí la va a haber.
Y yo también, como parte de Somos un Pueblo Unido, puedo añadir que en Albuquerque y en Río Arriba y en Santa Fe y en muchos lugares de Nuevo México, las ciudades y los condados están trabajando directamente con organizaciones como las nuestras para poder no solo distribuir recursos, pero ayudar a nuestra comunidad a saber sobre todos los recursos que existen. Pero lo que también sabemos es que no es suficiente. Todo el alivio que podemos a nivel local no va a reemplazar la cantidad de dinero de los cheques de estímulo, ni va a reemplazar el desempleo, que pues son aproximadamente $1,000 para familias que han sido, trabajadores que han sido descansados a la semana por 39 semanas. Y por eso es tan importante que nuestros líderes federales y también estatales incluyan a nuestra comunidad para poder reinvertir ese dinero en nuestros hogares y también en nuestras comunidades locales. So we are going to jump now, if no one else has anything to add, to our, to Michael from, make sure I get your name right. All I have is Michael from the Las Cruces Sun News. Michael, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yeah, sure. So this is more of like a two-part question. So first, for anyone who's able to answer, what sorts of steps are you taking to get some of these policy recommendations noticed at the federal level? And this is more probably for Johanna, if she could answer what more she's planning to do at the city government level. Because I know that there's a lot of kind of boundaries, between the anti-donation clause and what the city's allowed to do to help immigrants. So what do you think you're going to be doing moving forward with that?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely something that I've been thinking about more and more. I think the amount of relief that we've provided already is definitely not enough, and it will not cover what people need right now, especially as we head into May 1st and rent is due and bills are due. So continuing to support agencies like the Community Action Agency, continuing to support agencies like Catholic Charities that already have a strong pulse to the community, so that they can continue to get aid out to families. And I'm going to encourage that our mayor and the rest of the council continue to push the federal government and our federal delegation, so that any funding that comes from a federal aid package is unrestricted. We know what's best for our community, and the federal government should allow us to spend whatever that money looks like, to spend it on our constituents the way that we see best fit. So I will continue to push on the delegation to ensure that, number one, the 500,000 population restriction is taken out, right? That only qualifies one city in the state. So to ensure that Las Cruces gets some aid, some unrestricted aid, quickly.
Very good. And our organizations, Michael, have been working together again to narrow that information gap, that two-way information gap, and we're doing roundtables with our federal delegation. We're engaging our members. We're engaging our allies. Things like this with the report, we really are so grateful to Voices for Children for rapidly putting this together to make sure that policymakers know not just the impact that it has on our families, and you've heard from some of our families, but the impact that it has on the economy and in our efforts to our future efforts to jumpstart the economy, and our future efforts to be a part of the recovery that is going to be so needed in New Mexico. So we'll be sending, again, copies of these reports to all of our elected officials, and we're just going to keep pushing and arming them with the information that they need to actually fight. Many of our legislators, our federal delegation, are fighting for New Mexicans, and so we're arming them with as much information so that they can be even stronger champions for all New Mexicans, including immigrants. We have a question from Susan from the Santa Fe, New Mexico Political Report. Susan, ¿quisieras hacer tu pregunta, por favor?
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. My question is, how bad, if no relief comes to immigrant families, how bad do you think the economic problem will get? Do you foresee that families will lose their homes and become homeless, that they'll be starving, or are you already seeing that?
Hi, Susan. Thanks for that question. And I think it's a great one because it really highlights how dire and how important this situation is. We noted in the report that 1 in 10 New Mexicans is an immigrant. And so if we're leaving out so many of our communities from really essential relief when we're seeing unprecedented health and economic challenges, that's going to have major detrimental implications, not just for those immigrant families and their children, but for our entire state. So we estimate 60,000 people in New Mexico don't have full documentation, so they're lacking access to this relief. Nearly 40,000 New Mexico kids who have parents that may not be able to receive this relief. And so We know that this will likely, if not addressed, that this will lead to homelessness. This will lead to hunger. This will lead to children, even when they go back to school, not being able to go to school when they, having food in their bellies. They're not going to be prepared to learn. We may have immigrant-owned businesses who go out of business because their families can't access that relief. That means more jobs lost, more families hurting. Going into this crisis, we were already ranked near the bottom in many indicators. A near worst rate of poverty among workers in the country. 1/4 of the kids in New Mexico experience food insecurity. And all of these challenges are even higher often for immigrant communities who often don't have access to the same opportunities that other residents of our state do. So we had huge challenges. We're facing unprecedented ones. And if we don't address immigrant families, all New Mexico families, workers, communities, businesses in this relief, we're going to see dire circumstances for our state. And it's going to take that much longer for us to recover from this health and economic crisis.
Thank you, Amber. Is there anyone else who wants to ask a question? I think we have a question from Bruce. Would you like to ask that question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. You spoke about the need for action, and that you have some legislators and advocates in government. Is anybody taking the lead? Because the session is coming up sometime in about a month and a half, maybe 2 months at the most. And right now, there's so much ambiguity over what they're going to do that I'm sure it's frustrating a lot of people. But one thing they seem bent on doing is they're going to be cutting. And protecting services and some of the ground that was gained just in the last year may start going backwards unless people are forcefully staking out their claim right now. Do you have any legislators that are really working on that at this point? More than just words, but actually finding a pathway for you to accomplish that?
So, although not an original speaker, we have a representative, New Mexico representative from Bernalillo and Albuquerque, Representative Javier Martinez, who has been a part of this effort and is graciously willing to speak out in regards to this question. Can you make sure that you unmute yourself, Representative Martinez?
Yes, thank you, Marcela, and thank you for the question, Bruce. Indeed, we are headed into the special session sometime in June. Part of the reason why we're waiting until June, other than obviously the pandemic, is to have a full understanding of what's coming in terms of federal funds to the state. Given that situation, we feel fairly comfortable that there's going to be enough funding to, at the very least, offset some of the shortfalls that we're going to face in fiscal year 21. Now, to your question, yes, there are a number of legislators, myself included, that are committed to not going into a special session solely for the purposes of imposing austerity on our state budget and on government services. You are absolutely right. We've made tremendous gains over the last couple of years in things like public education, early childhood, healthcare. There's commitment in the House of Representatives to ensure that we don't go back to the austerity of the previous administration. We also have every indication from the executive that, in fact, they're going to be working with us to come up with creative ways to ensure that we balance the budget, but not on the backs of the working class, not on the backs of working families, not on the backs of undocumented workers. Specific to this conversation, I can tell you, Bruce, that there's a number of us working on some policy ideas to help provide some support and relief to undocumented workers. Undocumented workers are part of the backbone of our economy here in the state, as you heard on this press conference. We have workers in the oil fields, in the dairy industry, in agriculture, in the service industry in Santa Fe. We have to do something. And the archaic, cruel rules of the past that are haunting us right now will no longer be acceptable to us here in the state. Undocumented workers cannot get unemployment benefits. Even if they've spent 30 years working, they cannot access food assistance. They cannot access healthcare. There are thousands of New Mexico children right now going to bed hungry because the federal government has completely ignored them. So we have some big plans, and we're going to be pushing really hard, not just during the special session, but come the regular session in January and beyond. It's a new day here in New Mexico for undocumented people.
I'd also just point you, Bruce, to the report's recommendations and what Amber had sort of spelled out about some of the additional policy proposals. There are already tax credits, for instance, for low-income workers that are in place, but that exclude, like the Working Families Tax Credit, immigrants who use their ITINs to pay their taxes. And so part of our set of strategies and policies is, what is already there in existence. Let's just make sure that we're not discriminating against immigrant taxpayers because of their national origin. And so making sure that we are as inclusive as possible with the current policies and the current funds and tax credits that are available. Did you have a follow-up question, Bruce, that you wanted to ask?
Yes, just briefly, probably to the representative. Thank you for answering that question. It was very helpful. One of the things I saw creep into some of the dialogue, I believe it was today or yesterday, but it was from the rather powerful chairwoman of the House Appropriations and Finance Committee, in which she used a phrase which sent a shudder up my spine, having seen what happened several years ago. But she said, we're going to have to start sweeping again. And that's one of the concerns that I have, that there's a certain mentality from folks who are in powerful positions that they have to rescue everybody by cutting. And I do understand there needs to be some balance, but that's the concern that I have. Marcella just pointed out something very important, which is dealing with tax credits and the like. But do you see any potential attack coming without it being necessarily mean-spirited, but just because it's an old school approach?
Please unmute yourself, Representative Martinez.
Bruce, I can tell you that I have a lot of respect for the chairwoman. I've worked closely with her in the past. I think that there is a lot of capital outlay money on the table for projects that have been stalled for years that we can sweep with minimal impact to people. These are projects that are not underway. There's money sitting in a bank. So number one. Number two, there's a lot of money we're leaving on the table through the tax code. We're looking at, I'm looking at as the incoming chair of the tax committee, rolling back the personal income tax rates to pre-2003 levels to bring progressivity back into the code. I'm going to be looking at rolling back the 2013 corporate tax rate cut, which quite frankly, in my 6 years in the legislature, no one, including the great analyst at the LFC, can show me that tax cut actually worked. In fact, we're seeing the opposite now. Big box stores are booming because those are the only places where we can shop. Capital gains, that's another place where we should be looking for money because the money's on the table. This is money that's exiting our economy before it even gets here. And then last, but certainly not least, gross receipts tax reform. The notion that we have this sandbox to play in, and that is the sandbox that we will stay in, is not going to cut it. Not now, not today, not with this legislature. And I know I speak for many of my colleagues when I say that. So thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I know I wasn't supposed to speak, but always happy to jump in.
And we're going to throw it back to Amber, who can speak to the immigrant angle on this. Amber.
Representative Martinez, I think he covered so much of that, you know, and all that I would say is that we saw where austerity got us. We saw where cuts to essential programs got us in the Martinez administration. We were driven to 50th in the nation in child well-being. We were driven to 50th in childhood hunger. We were driven to the worst rates of poverty among workers and among people who have a bachelor's degree or higher. We know what cuts do to our families, do to our workers, do to our communities, and they don't do anything good. It's not going to help. What we need to do right now is invest in our people. We saw where those tax cuts in 2003 and 2013 that Representative Martinez mentioned, we saw where those got us. Those led to $1 billion less every year in essential revenues that could have supported programs for our families and for our kids. You know, if we really want to survive through and thrive after this crisis, we need to ensure that all New Mexico families, including all immigrants in our state, have the opportunity to thrive, that immigrant children have the opportunity to go to New Mexico schools and read well and graduate and stay in our state and contribute to our economies just like their parents are. We need to make sure that all of our relief efforts are inclusive of families, and austerity will not get us there.
Well, it looks like we don't have anyone else in the queue for questions. And so again, if somebody has a question, KRWG News has a question. Would you like to ask it now? Please unmute yourself. Okay. Well, you chatted, you had a question, but we're not hearing you. So perhaps if your question is for one of the speakers, I want to just remind reporters that all the speakers today, their phone numbers are listed in the press packet, so you can contact them with any follow-up questions. And we again really want to thank Gladys, Nicte, Olga, Veronica, and Maria de Jesus from all over the state for sharing their stories with us today, for Voices for Children for putting together this report, and also to Counselor Joanna Bencomo, who sort of gave us a real, I think, insight into how this is impacting local economies. There are in the report, there's information about some of the cities and the counties with the highest percentage of immigrants, including Lee and Chavez and Doña Ana and Santa Fe. And so please look into the report to get some more feedback and to get some more information on that. And we really appreciate you joining us. Again, if you put your email in the chat box, we will make sure that people are that you get the full press packet, and including the link to the full report on New Mexico Voices for Children website. We are very grateful to our interpreters, Peter Catal and Maria Cristina Lopez, and we're going to wrap up. And thank you so much for joining us. Again, you will see the logos of our organizations: Partnership for Community Action, Somos un Pueblo Unido, Voices for Children, El Centro de Igualdad y Derechos, and CAFE, who have been working together to actually, along with a couple of our representatives, Representative Angelica Rubio and Representative Javier Martinez, again, to close that information gap, get good information to policymakers, and get good information to our own communities. So thank you very much, and we will see you the next time. Stay safe and healthy.